campus, and his day job is he's a senior policy advisor to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He's a development economist, and of course everything else about him you can read on the Wikipedia page. So thank you so much for being here with us. Please, we'd love to hear you.
Thank you. Usually the tougher job is to get the applause at the end of the talk. Okay. I'm far more familiar with ISB than you are, because I've been here for the last 15 years, ever since it started. I don't come here as often as I want to now, but I used to be very frequent, and I still teach a few classes for the executive courses. So first of all, I'm very familiar with all of you, and it's nice to see you all come to listen to this strange freewheeling talk that I've been asked to give. At the outset, let me tell you that I'm pretty familiar with what I'm going to talk about. So interrupt me as often as you can. It doesn't spoil my flow. Don't keep your questions for that. You don't have to. I'm going to talk about roughly what it means to work in public policy. Why public policy requires people like you. What kind of careers can you expect? What does the Gates Foundation mean as an employer? And some of the challenges that you face. That's how I've structured the talk in my head, but I might stray a little bit here and there. As I said, feel free to ask me. Alright, so let me start with the question, which is what do you think we teach you at the business? In one word, structure. What is it that we teach? Structure, decision making, thinking, decision making. That's really the answer. What we teach you is how to take decisions. What we teach you is hopefully that there are hundreds of variables, you're making one function, you know the values of some of those variables, and most of them are beyond your grasp. And therefore, 9 times out of 10, you will make the wrong decisions. And then we teach you that if you make wrong decisions, it's fine. You learn from there and go and make some more wrong decisions. That's the whole idea. That's why you're here. That's the only thing we teach you. Rest of the skills most of you have learned already, or you will learn when you go to work. Some technical skills of forecasting or in Excel sheets or whatever. That's the basic. Otherwise, we're teaching you how to take decisions in a mature manner, and watch out for black swan events. One book that I recommend all of you to read is Tariq's Black Swan. You will face black swan events, and now you will face them very often. And how you take them with a strong chin is what matters as far as you're concerned. Public policy is essentially decision making at a much grander plane, and with a much more pernicious influence on consumers. As marketing heads and whatever, you will take big decisions which involve, 1 million people, 5 million people, $100 million. As public policy experts, that goes tenfold and 20-fold. I spent a little bit of my life in the government. In some sense, started my career as an IAS officer of the 1993 batch. And there I learned that these very young joint collectors and sub-collectors, they are really powerful CEOs because they are handling 5,000 crores at 23, 24 years and 10 million people in a district. So it's a very big, onerous responsibility. And public policy, therefore, is what you do in corporate life multiplied 10 times. My favorite example these days is demonetization. Great example of a big public policy decision. And this is a case study for all of you. What would you do if you had evasion, counterfeit notes, terrorism, funding, drugs. On the other hand, job losses, collapse of the informal sector, breeding of a new informal economy, push towards digital transactions. What decision would you have taken? Think of it. I'm not going to give you any answers or discuss that, but it's a very fascinating public policy issue. It has every facet of a great business case. Is it as big a disaster as some people are making it out to be? Has it generated any positives? That's a classic. The next one is going to be GST. A clear answer that the GST is one tax. It will make one nation, one tax a reality. It will ease the level of doing business to a considerable extent. But look at the flip side. 60% of informal economy not ready for this supply, this value chain, software not available. How do you deal with a multiplicity of tax slabs? You know, GST, the way we have modeled it is that we made it 0, 5, 12, 18, back to the good old tax system. So, are we going the right way? What is going to be the impact? Again, a great public policy question. So, what do we do? What do we do at the Gates Foundation? I'm going to talk about those days when I used to be full-time at the Gates Foundation. Now I spend a day there. It's a fascinating place. The reason it's a fascinating place is that it is the richest charity in the world. We get to spend about $5 billion a year. And we have to spend that. You know, the IRS legislation makes us ensure that we spend 5% of our total purpose every year, else the tax liability comes in. So we have to spend $5 million, and it's an incredible problem. At the end of the year, November, December, we start scurrying around begging people to take money. It's far more difficult than collecting money. It's so difficult because you have to ensure that people have spent the money in the right manner and you've completed all the work. And it's often very difficult to spend money. So very often in your corporate life you found it very difficult to go and collect your dues. Here we find it extremely difficult to ensure that people spend their money. This is a major public policy. Take government budgets. Health sector. How much does the health sector get in India? The health sector gets from the federal government about 30,000 crores. Is 30,000 crores a lot of money? It's pitiable. It gives each one of us, about 80 rupees per capita. It's like among the lowest health expenditures in the world. And that's why the health sector is in terrible shape. But do we spend that 30,000? Despite the fact that millions of us are dying and have no access to health care, we can't spend that money. We often find that we return 30% of that to the treasury. Same with education, where there is it's a very curious position where there is huge amounts of demand. There is very little supply, but whatever you supply is actually oversupply. Why does that happen? This is the curious nature of public policy and of development sector that some of you are going to get into, and this is the major challenge that most of us face. So, what happens at the Gates Foundation? Well, a brief flashback, and it's quite exciting. 1996, 20 years ago, husband and wife sitting on a breakfast table, look at the New York Times and stare at a very strange headline. The headline says 5 million kids suffer from the rotavirus and 1 million of them die every year in Kenya. So Bill tells Melinda, rota. There must be a spelling mistake. What is rotavirus? And he tells us this story that I didn't even know that there was a word like rota. And I was appalled that 1 million kids died inoculate everybody against the rotavirus. And he said, I felt very foolish. $10 million. That was loose change in my pocket. and so many kids died. So they immediately write a check. That's the beginning of the foundation. For 5 or 6 years, random checks written to various such things, till Melinda decides that she wants to quit writing code and get into running the foundation. Bill announces in 2000 that he wants to quit in 2008. Nobody believes him because he's running this super empire, doing extremely well. Nobody believes him. And but in 2008, on that designated day, he comes, picks his bags and walks out, saying that okay, that's where I go my corporate career. Continues to be on board. So gives most of his wealth away. He's already the world's richest man at 39, and decides that he must give up most of that money. Then he does a very fascinating next step. Then he says that it's not enough, and that's what we discover next. That we get, as I said, when I started in 2009 at the foundation, we were spending about $4 billion. Now we spend about $5.5 billion a year. Lot of money, 30,000-40,000 crores. Is that a lot of money to? We work in Bihar. Our focus is Bihar. In Bihar, we spend about $150 million a year. Lot of money. Sounds like a lot of money. But it is 4% of the total health budget of Bihar. So, we are scratching the surface, even with $150 million. It's a lot of money when we work in Botswana or in Ivory Coast. But in countries like India, our expenditure is 0.01% of the total expenditure on health. So it's very little. But it is very important, and I'll tell you a little bit later why it's important despite being very small. So what Bill says is that it's not enough for me to spend money. It's not enough that I spend most of the money. I have to get others involved too. And therefore he starts what is known as the Giving Pledge Club. The Giving Pledge Club is an interesting club. You are all invited. The eligibility is that you have to be a billionaire. And that's one. That's not sufficient. That's necessary. Sufficient then is that you have to give up half that. So you are a billionaire to start with, and you are half a billionaire after you join it. What it gives you in return is one dinner every year with some people like you. There are now about 240 members. The first chap, and this is another fascinating story that Bill tells us, and we meet every year once in May, when everybody gathers in Seattle. He says that the first chap he thought of, his old friend, Warren. Right? Warren and Bill had been co-investing for a long time. So he calls up Warren and says that, look, I want you to come give up half your money. What nonsense. I don't do this. He says, no, we insist that you have to come spend 3 days with us at the foundation. Warren Buffett comes, spend 3 days at the foundation. End of the third day says, you know what, half my wealth, I will not take it all. The only condition being that you have to spend. So we changed the trust act and get one. But it's very difficult to do that. We only had 2 trustees, 3, Bill Senior, Melinda and Bill. Now we added Warren Buffett. Now we have a full house, and we get about $28 million of Warren Buffett money. So certainly we have lots of money. It became a serious problem because you have to spend 5% of that in the most difficult circumstances, because much of the development sector is extremely difficult to work. It's not that it's corrupt. There is enough corruption and leakage, but it's not the most corrupt place. There are a lot of good people, but it's very difficult to spend, primarily because there is no human resource. There is no skill. We want to hire doctors in India. We don't get them. Why? Because we want doctors who can treat tuberculosis. 5 million new cases of tuberculosis in India. 1 million people die of tuberculosis every year. Tuberculosis is a stupid disease that was treated 70 years ago. The BCG vaccine was invented in 1942. All of Europe banished tuberculosis 60 years ago. We still have 95% of the world TB, but it costs 18 rupees to treat somebody of tuberculosis. But you know, a million people die every year. And paradoxically, where we have done well by giving people medication, we have people dying of overdose of medication. You know, it's called drug-resistant tuberculosis. And the city that tops the world in drug-resistant tuberculosis, 79,000 people last year dying of drug-resistant. So, how many people do we have who can tackle tuberculosis? In the government of India, there is a tuberculosis program which looks after these 5 million people. And this is only 59% of the total by our estimate. So, it's double that. How many people do we have there? In the big tuberculosis division in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in the federal government of India, one person who is running this program, one person who is running the family planning program, one person. So it's a huge problem of human rights. That is why, you know, it's really important that we get a lot of people like you interested in talking about it. Not just because it requires all of you, but also because it answers all your questions, all the questions that you look for in your career. Big platform, large number of customers, huge strategic decisions, tremendous problems with supply chains, huge logistical issues, anything that you can think of, and obviously lots of human resource problems. The last thing in this introductory bit, the last skill that I want to talk to you about. When you spend $100 million, how much of this money should you spend on tracking this money, on finding out what the impact is? Give me a rough figure. You're spending 100 rupees. How much of that money should you spend on evaluating its impact? 10%, 20%. We do 30%. We spend 30%. We spent, like in Bihar, we spent $22 million just in monitoring. We get a lot of flack for that. And should be spending $30 million, you can treat all the babies that are dying of sepsis. Why spend $32 million just on chasing the money that you've already spent? The Gates Foundation, primarily because of Bill Gates, believes that it is never enough to just spend the money. It is very important to measure. Here is a little philosophical question that I'm leaving with you. Our belief is that do what you can measure. If you cannot measure it, don't do it. This is a big developmental dilemma. That there are some things you can't measure. And if you can't measure and you don't do, then are you leaving out a large section of population? We are very fanatical on that. We will only do what we can measure. Right? We get a lot of criticism for that. The second thing is that intervene only where you see a scientific solution. Don't intervene where there are no cultural solutions, social solutions, religious solutions. Get into only those things where there are scientific solutions. Therefore, we have this, our one constant ambition is that we will vaccinate all kids in the country. And we get into all sorts of problems there. I won't talk about that. But our belief is that we will vaccinate every kid in Bihar. So let me step back a little and talk to you about generally what the development sector is about. I've worked in various ways in the development sector in several areas.
So, why Bihar?
Yeah, good question. Fascinating answer to that. One is that look at the indices. What state do you find at the bottom? Did all of you say Bihar? No. You know, it's a tough, there's a lot of competition there. And the state that is now winning that race is Madhya Pradesh. But you know, they are all, I mean, it's very difficult to choose Bihar, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, it's very difficult. They have terrible indicators. So that was one reason. But the real reason was from something quite dramatic. We decided in 2008 that we will work in the MNCH area, which is the maternal and child health area. And because lots of Indian, it's a tragedy that even now, huge number of our pregnant mothers die, the highest in the world. And a large number of kids, and I'm not giving you the number, right? Millions of kids die when they are born, 48 hours after they are born, 1 month within their birth, and 5 years. Highest maternal, neonatal, under 5 mortality in the world, by far. We are worse than most sub-Saharan African countries, and than all of them. So we decided that we will get into the maternal and child health. What do? Health in India is a state service, unlike taxation and whatever. You know those political economy issues. So we write to 4 chief ministers, 4 of the lousiest states in the country, in those indicators. Right? So we write to Uttar Pradesh, we write to West Bengal. Uttar Pradesh, nobody gives a damn. West Bengal, some principal secretary calls up and says that the chief minister is very busy. Madhya Pradesh can't be bothered. But Nitish Kumar lands up in our office by, you know, that fax went in the morning, and 5 o'clock he was there at our office in Delhi. That was the only reason we did PR, because here was somebody who was willing to work with us. So you find that several of these decisions might have a science behind them or might just be completely accidental. So, what about public policy professionals? What about you people as public policy? Do people like us look for your institutions to give us high quality human resources? The answer is yes. We've been hiring from ISB for some time. I see a lot of your alumni in a lot of development sector platforms that earlier I didn't, right? 5-6 years ago, I never saw too many of my students from ISB, but now I see a lot of you. Why are you there? Because one, you have got more aware of what the public policy issues are, and the public policy platform has become more receptive to the kind of training that you receive here. For example, this whole focus on monitoring and evaluation. We want people like you to come there and tell us what the impact has been, to calculate what the real cost of an intervention is, to see how we get the maximum bang for the buck, to see how we retain our employees, to see how financing, various financing models can be incorporated. Some of you have done some very good work on insurance versus derivatives. In agriculture, for example, some of your alumni have been doing phenomenal work on supply chains. Agriculture supply chains are awful. That's a serious problem for India. How do you? And these are very simple techniques, and it is transformative. And it's a big business, right? $500 billion. So that is where we are seeing a lot of people like you come, both here and our big office is in Seattle. 1,200 of us is there, 600 in Washington DC, 100 in Delhi, 50 in Beijing, and about 50 in London. Now we have some offices in Africa. Similarly for CARE, PAR, World Health Organization, most of the multilateral institutions, these are all institutions that are looking at people who come with your skill set in understanding and, as I said right in the beginning, in making decisions. Because while you have humongous variables in the corporate sector, you can imagine so many more in the development sector and of far more fragile nature of experimenting with people. For example, in Kenya, when we funded the whole M-Pesa intervention, it was fascinating because it was small little intervention from us and it completely transformed Kenya. The kind of digitization of payments that happened there in a country like that which was a complete cash economy, was phenomenal. 5-6 years, the whole thing changed from about 5% digital transactions to about 78% digital transactions. You know, the last thing that I want to mention before stopping here is that in all our work that we are doing right now, we are facing huge challenges. Right? And that's the fascinating, from a very personal kind of thing, while it is a disaster as far as the country is concerned. But from a personal point of view, it is great. The bigger the challenge, the bigger the satisfaction and all of that. And today, when I've been through, I used to do a lot of work with agriculture when I began hundreds of years ago. And then moved into education, then did a little bit of work on labor. Over the last few years, have been focusing completely on health. To me, the revelation in the last few years was that India's biggest challenge is something else. And I will prod you to think. What do you think is India's biggest challenge? Just one word.
Corruption.
You will notice that I am still waiting for the answer. All of this politics, inequality, fascinating. Well, you know, all of the above, certainly. But, you know, now at least me and a few others have come to believe that our biggest challenge is that we treat our women very bad. You know, India's largest challenge is gender disempowerment. It is atrocious. And a lot of our problems emerge from the fact, from this basic fact. Why are our education levels so low? Because we don't allow women to study. Because if gross enrollment ratio among men is 12% and 13%, it's 2% among women. You know, we are the only country in the world which has achieved this unique distinction that 10 years ago, 2004, 47% of our women participated in the workforce. The female participation rate was 47%. 2004. Then we invested heavily in education, sent so many women to school. What should happen to the female participation? Well, 2014 when we count, is 27%. Only country in the world where female work participation rate actually comes down. I know most of you don't look like you've been either pregnant or been responsible for one. But you know what happens to a pregnant woman. What should happen to a pregnant woman's weight? Should it, right? Everybody knows that. Thumb rule, at least 1 kilo a month. There is one country in the world where pregnant women lose weight. Only one country. And this is like 2011 census, great Princeton paper. And a lot of, as I said, you know, pregnant women, 55% of them are anemic, have very low hemoglobin counts, therefore they will produce low birth weight babies, therefore the baby will be a malnutrition right from the beginning, therefore we will have very high under 5 mortality. So the problem is there. We are trying to solve the problem by feeding